I thought week one of this course would be fairly straightforward. I'd already done a couple of maintenance courses beforehand, so I went in feeling fairly confident. But by the Friday, I was starting to question reality over a bicycle wheel. So yeah, maybe not as straightforward as I thought. So this week was the first week of the City and Guilds Level 2 Cycle Mechanics qualification course. 5 days, commuting from East to West London for 9 AM starts. And honestly, the days just flew by. They really did. The instructor was a guy called Colin, who runs his own mobile bike mechanic business. A really nice guy, good teacher, very chatty, very practical. But what surprised me most was how much of this course wasn't actually about fixing bikes. It was about surviving as a mechanic. Colin kept repeating things like never quote, always estimate. And he told us to get used to saying the phrase, this needs workshop time. And one of the biggest things he talked about was money. He was very honest about the fact that there isn't loads of money in bike mechanics unless you specialise or build systems around it. So instead of relying on random quick fixes, he targets hotels and businesses with fleets of bikes, which I found really interesting because suddenly this stopped feeling like a guy tinkering with bikes and more like a real service business. The first thing we learned was how to properly perform safety checks. There was this really detailed M-check system for beginners, and then Colin introduced a quicker ABC check, which he uses professionally. And weirdly, that became a theme for the week. Beginners really need granular systems when starting out, whereas with experience, people are able to compress things for efficiency. That can probably apply to basically everything in life. Anyway, part of the assessment was finding faults on a bike where Colin had secretly planted 5 problems. And I found all 5 problems in well under 2 minutes. It felt great at the time, maybe too great, because I think I got a little overconfident after that. The next couple of days were mostly gears, cables, indexing, bottom brackets, all that sort of stuff. And I started noticing something really interesting about how I learn. Whenever we sat listening to theory for long periods, I kind of started zoning out a bit. But the second we started doing the task, everything just clicked into place. I clearly learned best through doing more than memorization. And I also started realizing there's a massive difference between learning mechanics on training bikes and actual customer bikes. Because these bikes we're learning on are clean, they're controlled, they're fairly well maintained. And the most stress they experience are students working on them. Whereas real bikes out in the world are filthy, rusty, worn out, modified badly, you name it. So it's this constant feeling of, I'm getting better, but also I haven't actually seen any chaos yet. And something I may have underestimated is just how tiring retraining is as an adult. One morning I had to drop my daughters off at an early breakfast club at 7:30 AM before rushing across London to make it to the course for a 9 AM start. My youngest was really upset at drop off, and honestly it completely threw me mentally for like half a day. And that's something I realised this week. When you retrain later in life, you don't arrive empty. You arrive carrying family, stress, responsibility, fatigue, money troubles, everyone's carrying something, and then still try to learn something new on top of that. And then came wheel building, and this was the moment the course humbled me. The actual lacing part, I loved it. I flew through it. But then came truing the wheel, and to be honest, it kind of broke my brain a little. Tiny adjustments in one place were affecting something somewhere else completely different. Left and right started becoming confusing, and at one point my wheel looked like a Pringle. And for the first time all week, I was the one holding everyone up. That was quite humbling. But weirdly, it was probably important because up until then, I was doing pretty well and everything was going quite smoothly. And I think I needed a reminder that learning a new skill properly means eventually hitting something that makes you feel incompetent again. And that's probably where the real learning starts. Eventually I got my wheel completed, it was fully trued and tensioned properly, and I was so proud of it. Not because it was perfect, but because earlier on in the day, I honestly thought I was completely losing the plot. And I think that's what this whole experiment is really becoming about. Not bikes, not qualification, but what it actually feels like to become a beginner again in your 40s. The confidence, the frustration, the progress, the doubt, all of it. And next week is assessment week, so we'll see how that goes.